So welcome to today's webinar on connecting to culture through school food. We've got a great hour lined up for you. We have many folks joining us from multiple time zones, and some folks who are going to be watching this after the call. So no matter when you're joining or where you're joining from, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I do just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Please note that we are recording today's conversation and we will be spotlighting our speakers. So you're welcome to keep your camera on or off, whatever you're most comfortable with. Just a reminder to please also mute yourself. We are using Zoom meetings and not webinar, so you have the power. And at the end, you'll have some time to participate in a Q&A, and so you'll be welcome to unmute. Or you can put questions in the chat as we go along, and we will get to those at the end of the session once we've worked through all of our speakers. So I think that about covers our housekeeping items. And we've got a few more folks online now. So with that, I will take a moment to formally introduce myself. My name is Jessie Veenstra. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director here at Farmed Cafeteria Canada. I am joining you from and live as an uninvited guest on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, also known as Vancouver, BC. And I'm privileged to call these lands my home. And in working in this field where we strive to connect students to their food and the lands that it comes from and the people who help to bring it into their community and into their homes and their schools, it's important that we honor and respect the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have stewarded this land for thousands of years and continue to do so. We have so much to learn from their knowledge, from their ways of knowing, and I invite all of you to reflect on the lands that you're joining us from today. Feel free to say hello and share where you're joining from in the chat if you like. And as we go through the conversation, to consider how the lands that you're located on and the cultures of the people who make up your community, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, inform how you think about, prepare, serve, talk, and teach about food. Now, I realize that some of you might be new to Farm to Cafeteria Canada, so if you are, welcome. We're a partnership-based organization that works to transform how food is experienced, learned, and celebrated in all schools across Canada. And so one of the many ways that we do this is by celebrating Farm to School Month, which, if you didn't know, October is Farm to School Month, so happy Farm to School Month, everyone. And what this month is really an opportunity to practice, inspire, and celebrate the diversity of school food activities and champions, folks like yourselves that are making this work happen across our country. And at this time of year, we especially love to celebrate the power of food to connect us to the world around us. And so today we're really excited to celebrate the connecting power of food, and specifically school food to culture. So with that, I wish you all a happy Farm to School Month, and just thanks for the great work that you do in your community as school food champions. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest host for today's conversation, who's going to guide us through the next 55 or so minutes. Shiva Reddy is a food and wine expert with more than a decade of experience teaching and managing in the hospitality industry. She is also the food and wine correspondent for CBC Vancouver, where you can catch her on the coast on Monday afternoons Pacific time, or on demand if you have the CBC app and look for On the Coast. She is also the host of a fantastic new TELUS docu-series called Not Your Butter Chicken, and I encourage everyone to check that out after the call. But first, live with us here today, we have Shiva Reddy, and we're so thankful to have her here. Thanks for being here, Shiva. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hey, thanks for having me, you guys. Okay, this lineup is
Mandy Bell
absolutely
has joined the meeting.
incredible.
iPad has left the meeting.
Oh,
The host spotlighted your video for everyone.
Every once in a while, you might hear that. We like to announce sometimes when people are coming in, so you might hear people coming in, coming out. It might end at some point, but nonetheless, today you get a great lineup of incredible folks who are working to better food literacy and food education for students. I get to begin with Avni Soma. Avni Soma is the vice president of both the Bow Valley Food Alliance, as well as the Alberta Food Matters. Also is a member of the Canadian Food Policy Advisory Council and is a parent volunteer and one of the driving forces of the Mountain Fire Foods Behind School food programs. Now, she is located in Canmore, Alberta, and will later be getting more into this as well. We also have here Chef Nimi Erasmus. She's a chef educator and just an absolute force of nature who just loves to educate students. Here, she's a Red Seal chef. She's really transformed all of the programs that she's been a part of, both in the interior and the lower mainland of British Columbia, and really has a focus on farm-to-table approaches, liking to use more local ingredients and teaching students the essentials of cooking skills and making more of a meaningful connection with culture through food. And speaking with her as well, I can't wait for you guys to hear about it. She likes to work without recipes and getting kids connected that way too. Next up, we will have Chef TJ County. Now, he is the owner and operator of Ono Vancouver Kitchen Consulting Company. Now, he's working with many different kinds of programs, from school food programs, nonprofits, restaurants, and startup charities, providing community meals in the downtown east side as well. And most recently was a former Delta Hotels executive chef. And you'll get to hear him chat alongside with Brett Mansfield, who we all know and love. They are together the co-founders of Lunch Labs. And moving on to tell you a little bit about Brett Mansfield, not only does he run miles and miles, quite a bit around Parliament, as well as elementary schools, to bring in a lot more publicity to show that there is federal investment possible. He's been able to bring over billions over 5 years in the national food and school programs. Now, starting off with Avni. Avni, can you tell me a little bit about the program that you have started?
Sure. Thanks, Shiva. So
Viewing Jenna West, she, her, S screen. Jenna West, she, her, has started screen sharing.
okay, thanks for that, AI. I'm joining you as Shiva mentioned from Canmore, Alberta's Treaty 7 territory. We're next to Banff, for those of you who may not know. We're a small town with Banff for a combined population of about 20,000. And my kids go to the Francophone school in town. It's the smallest school in the Bow Valley, and we're run by the Franco-Sud School Board. So our small school is about 200 students, and it goes from kindergarten to grade 12. And we also share the building with our preschool friends who are right next to us in the kitchen. So we get to see all this preschool kids. This is a picture that you see of the kitchen that we have in our school, which is very small. There's 2 regular stoves, couple microwaves, and behind Gwyneth, one of the parents here, is we have a commercial dishwasher. So that's the extent of our commercial kitchen, which is pretty much nothing. So our food is not cooked in this kitchen. It's cooked in a commercial kitchen by the chef that we work with, Damien of Mountain Fire Foods, which I'll tell you about him in a little bit. So yeah, so that's just a little bit of our space, about our space. And then how our program started, since all of us here, you can see in this picture, are parent volunteers. And I'm the parent that started the program and currently still run it. I was approached, because we're a Francophone school, I was approached by one of the parents that came from France. So he grew up in France. And some of you may know that in France, they have a cantine program there. So they're used to having food provided for them at school. So he found it odd that his kids didn't have that same option here. So I think what happened is a bunch of parents from France were talking, and the idea of starting a program came up, and they suggested that parent come and talk to me to start the program. So he kind of planted the idea in my ear. And then, so I did decide to start the program, and I chose to work with a chef that I wanted to get to know. I didn't know Damien that well, but I started to, this was an opportunity to get to know him and work with him. So I'm gonna tell you, Jenna, can you flip to the other picture? I'm gonna show you a picture of Damien. There's Damien. And I'm just gonna read his description on his website. So Damien has his own catering business. It's called Mountain Fire Foods here in town. So this is Damien's quotes off his website. Over 3 decades in hospitality, I've transformed from dishwasher to executive chef, and now owning my own culinary enterprise. My journey started in the picturesque Bow Valley in the mid-'80s, and it's been marked by a steadfast commitment to creating exquisite dishes using the finest ingredients. And I'm just going to interject. He has had experience cooking for a lot of people when he worked up north cooking at the camps. So he has quite a breadth of experience cooking for a large number of people. So back to Damien. Beyond the kitchen, I'm a proud Indigenous individual with an amazing partner and 3 wonderful children. Whether embarking on family adventures or pushing physical boundaries at the gym, proper nutrition remains paramount in my life. For me, food isn't just sustenance, it's the fuel for life's passion and adventure. So that is Damien. And I'm finding we're learning a lot from each other. The most recent thing is that he is trying to use coconut oil instead of seed oils right now for some health reasons. So we're experimenting with that. So I can tell you a little bit about our program, just the logistics of the program. So I come up with the menu ideas, and then Damien and I go back and forth on them. And now we've run the program for 2 years, full 2 school years, and this is our 3rd school year running the program. So we have a inventory, let's say, of menu items that we cycle through. And then there's always new ones introduced, and depends on what season it is and things like that. So that's how we do the menus. And through doing the menus, I learn a lot. That I would say that would be. So Jesse was saying this webinar is about connecting culture and food, and our program, just the way it's set up and the way we do our menu selections just brings in culture. Particularly my culture, which is South Asian cuisine, and Damien's culture, which is Indigenous cuisine. So I would say we're evolving cuisines is how we're doing it. And then we're a Francophone school, so we always have like French cuisine on the menu as well. So that's how we do the menus. And then I source the ingredients from what I define as ethical ingredients. So I source the ingredients, Damien cooks all the meals, and then each day, right before, or the day before the meal, I send out an email to the parents, just describing, sometimes it's describing where the ingredients came from, maybe a story about the farmers, because I have relationships with a lot of the farmers that we source ingredients from. Sometimes it's about the dish. For example, like we were doing for some time, we were calling it, I'm sure everyone's familiar with like a glory bowl or some kind of bowl. And I didn't make the connection until I was telling my mom about the menu, and she said, well, that's just, we have the same thing, we call it something different, and it happens to be like one of my favorite foods right now. Like when I was growing up, it was one of my favorite foods, but I didn't make that connection that this glory bowl idea of like just raw ingredients and then putting a sauce on it was something that we had in my food culture growing up. So that's kind of fun. So things like that always are coming up as I write these emails and share these kinds of stories with the parents. The other one,
Now, Mimi, I had a quick question about that before we wrap up on that specific one. But can you tell me a little bit about, you were telling us about the idea of dal, and how you were repurposing the names for that as well. Just because you're in a homogenous space, there isn't that many different kinds of culture, but you are bringing things that are a part of the land and repurposing names. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So dal, so in South Asian cuisine, we have dal, and it's made from different kinds of lentils, depending on where you're from, time of year, that kind of thing. And so Damien has learned to cook with lentils and beans and all these kinds of things. And then he comes up with names that I'm just gonna say maybe are more accessible to people in our school. Like, so he called something that I call rajma, which is like a kidney bean dish, and he called it Indian chili. And I'm like, yeah, it's totally Indian chili. It's the same ingredients. Like, it's exceptional.
I love that. That's amazing. Now we are going to transfer over to Chef Nimi. And then also, everybody, we will be having a Q&A session right after this. So all of the questions, and going right back to some of these great points, we're going to have a large moment for that afterwards as well. But thank you, Avni. Chef Nimi. Chef Nimi is actually in the kitchen right now. I don't know if you guys can see her. She's ready to go, and she's going to show us around as well.
Good evening. Good evening from Surrey, British Columbia. My name is Chef Nimi. I've been not yelling at students, so my voice is a little off today, and I do apologize. Well, my name is Chef Namrata Rebecca Erasmus. I am super proud to be a part of Surrey Schools. This is my fourth program, designing my fourth program in British Columbia. My background, I've been an executive chef. Sorry, I worked my way up to being an exec chef. I've opened a few restaurants, 2 in Canada, 1 in the United Kingdom. In the industry, I was trained under a Michelin chef in UK. So switching from industry to a complete different profile as teaching, and that too teaching high school students, has been it's been a roller coaster and just absolutely rewarding. This is my second program for Surrey Schools, and you are in my teaching kitchen. I wish I could show you. This is the classroom part of the kitchen, and if I have a couple minutes to spare, this is the small teaching kitchen we have, and in here we prepare meals for 350 kids that we feed in a matter of 45 minutes without any recipes. So we try to support as many farms as possible. We try to bring in as local as possible ingredients. Everything in our kitchen is made from scratch. The only thing the kids have to work with is that mise en place means everything to be prepped, or
Do we still have Chef Nimi? She may have hopped off by accident. Connections, we love them. In which case, why don't we go over to TJ? And she's back. Wow, welcome. I know we had a quick little pause, but you were showing us your kitchen.
Where did it stop?
I think we are now at the point where you're telling us a little bit about your teachings.
Okay.
And then also telling us about how you're showing the cultural significance through the foods that you guys
Thank you. So, sorry, we basically, the board in the back here, as you can kind of see with my scribbles written, is what we go with during the day. And the kids get to cook food from where they're from. So today we made something called potu, which is a Filipino steamed cake. We got fresh yams in, and I said, kids, figure it out, and they made their grandma's recipe, one of their great grandma's recipe, and we made a Filipino steamed cake, and we then infused it with caramel. So what I do is I take traditional, authentic food, and then we marry different ingredients and we switch it up. So we will make anything from paella, which was served, which is a traditional Spanish dish, and we infused it with some balsamic and changed the ingredients up, and then highlighted scallops, BC prawns, BC mussels as a garnish. And because my kids here, mainly the kids are Arabic, so pork is something that's not consumed. Pork was taken out from it. And we feed, because of the, I guess, the production that we do, this kitchen it's always had the background of being a production kitchen. You know, feeding 350 high school students in 45 minutes is not a joke. So that's what we do. And that's why the kids get to learn all the culinary skills, pardon me. They get to learn all the culinary skills, but they get to create things that are native and culturally appropriate to them. My background, I'm from India. So I spent 15 years of my life in India. I came to Canada when I was in grade 9, kind of have the best of both worlds. So I get to take authentic Indian flavors, marry them into something else, and feed a crowd. We're also partnered with, well, Farm to School BC. We are trying to partner with as many farms as we can across the Lower Mainland to be able to support them to bring in sustainable ingredients, and everything in our kitchen, including some pastas are made from scratch. So with different ingredients. So we will do butternut ravioli, and we will do things like we bring in boar, and we bring in game meats to prepare game meats, and we'll do masala duck, or we'll do a masala duck stir fry. We've done Peking duck in the pack. So it's not your everyday burgers and fries. Our burgers are made in-house. Our buns get customized for us. Breads come from a North Van bakery to our doorstep, made fresh every day. So I try to partner in wherever I can, and I want to give good quality, high-end food to our crowd, to educate our youngsters of eating healthy. We also have a culinary garden. So I think this week they pulled out probably under a 5-pound horseradish, and they brought that in from the garden and brought it in and said, "Chef, you know, Merry Christmas." And so we are now dealing with horseradish this week. So we're making horseradish ice cream. We're making horseradish oil for our soup garnishes. We're making horseradish whipped cream that's going to be served with a steak sandwich. Horseradish whipped butter that's also going to go with the with steak sandwiches. We bring in strip loin to serve strip loin and make open face steak sandwiches and feed our crowd. And everybody is just, they love it. All our pizzas are made in-house. Our pastas, most of them are brought in. What else can I tell you? Soups are made in-house, but we're cooking for a large community. And majority of the meals.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Do you have photos that you could share with us for this one?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, beautiful.
This is what comes out of my teaching kitchen. You know, we make poke bowls in-house. We do, we're doing a Halloween special next week. Halloween falls on the 31st, Diwali falls on the 1st. We're making it as authentic as possible. For Diwali, we're giving them what's called an Indian thali, which is going to feature the best of India. But my kids get to put their own take. This is some of the stuff that we do. That first picture there with the deconstructed meringue was done by a grade 9 student. So they get to do plate ups. We did fried chicken and karaage chicken and mac and cheese in one of the pictures there. This is easier because I can just walk you through this. And all the salads are featured from all local farms. So everything is made in the Lower Mainland, brought into the schools, and that's how we cook. And nothing has recipes. So it's in my head, the kids get to create, and every morning we fly with something different, and we just make it. And I have perfect attendance, so that's really good. Kids want to be in the class.
That's awesome, Chef Nimi.
They just get to come and create.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of these. This is actually the perfect transition to Chef TJ. because we were actually chatting with Chef TJ earlier, and he was talking about cultural foods and the idea of Canadian identity as well. Chef TJ, would you be able to chime in on that, please?
Yeah, just wanted to, yeah, basically, with cultural food being our topic of the day, I wanted to just kind of send out a message out there that like with Canada being so multicultural, it's really, really important for us to embrace the multiculturalism in food as well. So whatever it is that is around your area should really be where we should be. That will be like where it would dictate, much like where in Surrey there may be some other kind of food. In downtown core we have a lot of multicultural, 52 languages I think it's in our school, so that really dictates being able to just kind of figure out what those communities eat, and that's basically what we try to say is that food is in Canada is ever evolving, and there's no such thing as Canadian food, just what is the food that is around your area.
That's fantastic. Now you are where are you at the moment? Show us around. Tell us everything about you.
So it's very fitting that I'm in so I'm doing an event at a appliance store, so like a kitchen appliance, home appliance store, because that is also how we make our food at Lord Roberts, Lunch Lab at Lord Roberts. We do make it in my in commissary kitchen, but at the end of the day, we only have one stove, 4 stoves in an oven, and a dishwasher. But at the end of the day, we're able to feed 160 kids every Tuesday and Thursday. And I'm sure Mr. Brent will go into all the details. But at the end of the day, we cannot have an excuse of not being able to feed that many kids if we're able to do it with just a stove and an oven.
Now, you made a great point about receiving the amount of funding that is there, but also using it wisely and not constantly putting it towards the cheap and easy processed foods. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, like much like I said, there's no more excuse if we're able to do this with that much resources. I do think that once the funding gets divided out to all of the different school food program, we really need to be able to think to have a more thoughtful approach to what we can offer the kids in our school. We don't want it to be just more chicken strips, more French fries, more pizza. We really, if there's any the diversity of the chef that is in here, we're able to do what we can do best because we have the right people in place. We have the right chefs in place to be able to deliver these programs. So really, yeah, that's kind of the message.
That's fantastic. Now, I know that your partner in crime happens to have some pictures for us to tell us a little bit more about this.
Pictures, and I'm actually going to show a minute of our students talking, because I think at the end of the day, this is actually about students' experience. And this is from a short CBC documentary that came out last September. And what I love about this and why I want to start with this is these are students that are talking to the filmmaker about their experience at Lunch Lab when neither teacher or I are present. I'm a believer that when students are using their own voice, I don't like me as their teacher standing over them. So Jenna's going to play a minute of this just to hear some of the students, and they're naturally, based on what they want to talk about, going to talk about some of the role of culture. And I'm going to speak a little bit to not just the what we eat as cultural food, but the how we eat it as the cultural dimension of food that I want to kind of surface into this conversation too. So if you can start that one, Jenna, please.
So it's almost time for the kids to come in for lunch.
Oh, and then jump to 5. There we go. Yeah, perfect.
Lab is an awesome place to try new things and meet new people, and there's like always different foods and stuff and I think it's an awesome place. You really should come here because it has excellent food. It's always nice to have more friends and to try different foods, and you'll learn a lot. There's lots of cultures and like different kinds of food. It's foods from every country sometimes, and it's really cool because some of these foods I've never tried before. Coconut pineapple curry, I didn't think I'd ever like that. And it sounded really gross to begin with, but I tried it and it actually tastes really nice.
You spent so much time preparing everything, and then when you get to try it, it's like, wow, this is really good, and it was made by 12-year-olds.
And you can stop there, Jenna.
So up until
And then go on to the next slide. I'll just tell you a little bit of background about
almost time
about Lord Roberts and the context. So I am a teacher. I'm a specialist teacher in that I teach edible education at Lord Roberts. So I work with all grade levels, kind of engaging them in the garden, in the kitchen, learning about food. And as an extension of teaching edible education, my grade 6, 7 students have the privilege of working with chefs in residence like Chef TJ, where they work in groups of kind of 8 to 10 students to be able to prepare a meal for. Now we're actually, TJ, hitting up over 200 students that are eating at every meal, right? So a very full room, a very happy, convivial space. It's fully a partnership with growing chefs. So it's not something we can do alone. So looking at the importance of partnership. And right now that's happening twice a week. And just to say, and TJ said this, it's a large urban multicultural school in the West End, so right in the heart of downtown Vancouver. Over 650 students at the school completely. And the last time we counted, it was 45 different first languages. So the cultural diversity of the school it's right there. And it's such a privilege to be able to learn with my students because they have so many food experiences. They have so much implicit knowledge that I don't have. And how do we bring that out through our school food programs? And the next slide is going to show you a couple pictures that TJ is going to speak briefly to about some of the space we have there.
Yeah, much like I was talking about earlier, we do this with one stove, one oven, and I mean, obviously with the help of an industrial kitchen, like commissary kitchens, we're able to do this. But really, the most important thing that I would say is be able to like adapt to your environment, and chefs are really good at that. Like you give them a kitchen, you let them have say of what they're good at or what they're expert at, and they'll be able to create something out of nothing. 200 kids, for example. Next slide.
And it's such a privilege to work with TJ. This is actually my classroom. I've kind of fought for the school's multi-purpose room, and we figure out how to share the space and make it work. And it's been the magic that working with Chef TJ, the delicious food he can create. And yeah, Jenna, you can go on to the next picture. And I think TJ is going to speak a little bit to some of how we've come up with this and what's important.
Yeah, so as I spoke about earlier, it's got to be reflected to your community. So same reason I was talking about earlier, what we have in the downtown core is multiculturalism. So we touch on everything, but we don't make it tokenistic. We don't make it so that the Chinese cuisine is only done during Chinese New Year. We don't do that. We just make it so that it's always representative of who and what we want to be able to accomplish in that space. But by celebrating our differences, it really makes everyone feel seen. Like we do adobo. One of the biggest thing, as much as you hear them say kale, we actually have done. They have heard a lot of adobo. So chicken adobo is one of our biggest seller. It through this we recognize people and kids in our community, and the kids being able to recognize their own food, being able to share and talk about it, and it's not ethnic but it's part of the mainstream, and we empower all these kids to see it as normal that and kind of change the narrative around ethnic food. So that they can kind of unlearn what the kids have, what their parents have taught them in a way, and then so we do certain things like different soups and Three Sister soups. We do what are the other ones that we do? Laksa. So everything from gyozas to pierogies to pot stickers we've done. And again, it's representative of what the type of people that we have. And through that, we're able to teach as well, being able to teach kids about where pasta comes from, and hint, it's not from Marco Polo. And then just being able to teach with the culture through food is really important to us as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, and
fantastic.
again, if you want to jump to the last one, I want to next one. So just to say too, and I kind of hinted at this, and I deliberately threw up the second page of the Canada Food Guide that we don't often look at, and it's not just the what, it's the how, right? So it's cultural foods to me is more than just, we could have a cultural food and we could sit on our own and we can eat it out of a takeout container. Is that a cultural dimension of eating? Or can we look at how we create the environments and culture, community, and care, right? So the ways that students are involved in washing dishes and serving food and preparing food kind of creates that cultural dimension of service and caring for one another, right? And I think it's a really important part when we look at school food programs that we also look at how are we enforcing positive messages around our relationship with food and culture. And in the BC curriculum, we have core competencies, and the personal and social core competency really gets at kind of that personal awareness and responsibility to self, but also the positive cultural and social identity so that students understand who they are in relation to their food and their culture. And I think we have such an opportunity through school food programs to be able to recognize that, to get grade 6 and 7 students actually recommending recipes based on, yes, health, but also taking those recipes home and asking questions of parents and grandparents and being able to contribute those ideas so that they see that reflected. And they come into the lunchroom and they're like, yeah, that's my food. This is my food recognized. And not only is it me, sitting this and just eating this by myself in a lunchroom and everyone else is kind of wondering what I'm eating, but everyone else gets to share that together. And that the social cohesion and the solidarity and the celebration of culture and community to me has been one of the most enjoyable parts of being able to be part of Lunch Lab over these last 5 years.
Now, Brett, can I ask you, how are parents reacting to this? Like, how do they become incorporated with that as well, especially if kids are going home asking for these recipes?
100%. So a ton of parents are actively involved in kind of volunteering on the front and end piece. I have parents come up to me all the time asking me for, how did you get my child to eat X vegetable or, chickpeas or whatever it is, because they never would for us. And then, TJ is going to roll his eyes at this one, but parents are constantly asking for recipes because they're like, whatever menu item that TJ, I was like, the problem is if you know Chef TJ, he's a little like Chef Nimi. Recipes? What are recipes, right? But it's, so how do we share that, and how do we take those ideas home so that parents can continue to learn through what their children are learning.
Well,
Now,
part of this.
Oh yes,
Sorry.
Chef.
Well,
No,
what I was going to say is part of that is making sure that the kids' stigma and the kids kind of like say on the food that they make it's very wide open. That's why we don't have rules, and recipes to me it's represent rules, right? So we'll use different spices, and much like Chef Nimni talks about, like we'll just pull out our spice drawer and say, hey, what do you think of this? And we'll guide them through it, but for the most part, it's just really not a lot of rules in our kitchen. And I think that in general, that's what becomes Canadian food anyways.
That's fantastic. May I ask for you guys, what kind of tips do you guys have for schools, food practitioners who don't have access to the same kind of kitchen that you have, or a meal program? How do you recommend that they jump in and get started?
I think the best thing is to look around who's around your community. Let's look around on what type of chefs are already dropping off kids in their school, and also what programs are out there that you may be able to tap into. And Lunch Lab, I feel, is a very grassroots program, because all of the parents that are in that community have helped to band around, try to put together this program, as much as Growing Chef and Lunch and Fresh Fruits and Mr. Brent has been able to bring it to the community. The community jumped right in and able to kickstart it.
Now, may I ask for everybody, or whoever wants to answer, have you guys come across any challenges offering any of the cultural programs at all in your programs? And how would you overcome them? That's actually pretty
Sorry.
good. If everybody's pretty quiet, that's not a bad thing. So
Sorry.
I might jump in there.
Please.
There's definitely been some resistance in our school, I'll say, to too much spice in our food. I would say we're less multicultural in our school than the schools than Chef Nimi and Chef TJ. So yeah, so we come to compromises, but we're a sign up program. So so sometimes when they see something on the menu that they may not recognize, they don't sign up for it. So there's a little bit of evolution and give and take around how we evolve it.
That's fair. And then we should actually move into our Q&A portion because we are getting quite a few questions here on the side. Jessie, would you like to hop in for our first questions that I may not see just yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions actually, and I think this is specifically for Brent and TJ, although I can't say for sure, is how is your what is the funding model for this, and is it through a grant? And I'll maybe start there, and Avni and Chef Nimi, if you have anything to add, feel free, because I know that that's always an interesting question, and it's a little bit different everywhere.
So I actually just ironically jumped in and was answering that in the chat, but I'll quickly speak to it. So, I mean, hey, a couple connections here. First off, at Lord Roberts, the initiation for this conversation was actually a Farm to Cafeteria Canada grant that kind of got myself talking with the parent and teachers. And then City of Vancouver was actually the first funder that funded Growing Chefs and Fresh Roots to be able to pull this together. Chef TJ didn't say, but he is actually a parent from the community. So a lot of parents have really gotten involved and kind of bought in, and many of them are actually employed. And then now it's a combination of there's grant funding. So Growing Chefs has multiple grants and multiple revenue sources that come in. It is pay what you can. So families are asked to pay $6 per meal. But if there's a number of students who are on full subsidy, families can do pay what you can. And then there's some that pay $10, right? So it's across the board. And the other part I'll be proud to say as an advocate is there is funding coming from the provincial government to the school district that is now coming back into Lunch Lab. So the first 4 years, we had no public funding from the province or the school district, but rather from the city. There is now a decent amount of that Feeding Futures funding that is coming back into Lunch Lab and is now supporting Lunch Lab to grow to multiple schools across Vancouver.
If I may just add on to that, like here at GP Secondary, we're a school of 1,500. Like Surrey Schools is at its capacity with the number of students that are coming through. So Surrey Schools has been given, I think, $6 million to actually support kids. And we have here, Guildford Park, we have about 140 kids on a meal program. So what we do is that it's a maximum of $6 per head. And they are given a selection, they're given a choice. And then we invoice Feeding Futures, which is obviously a funding that is provided by the provincial government. And you know what, it's been such a blessing because we're able to feed kids. And you're not just feeding kids burgers and fries. Things are made in house. Kids get to make it. It's an act of service, an act of love. And then and we're supported by the provincial government. Before, across in teaching kitchens, this class used to be called chef training back in the day. Then it moved to culinary arts, but now you have the province backing you up because this is a nationwide movement that's going in that actually started in Ontario, and now it's making its way across Canada because we have so many vulnerable children who need good food. So we are provided funding by them, and then of course partnering with farms. They love to support schools because they get to bring their produce in and get, it's everybody to the table and everybody to the culinary table and everyone joining hands to make this work. And of course, Farm to Cafeteria has been one of our main and the biggest supporter in our program. I hope that helps answer your question.
And I'll just quickly jump in because I would say then our program is more at its infancy where we are piecing together funding, like Brent was saying earlier. So we're just in our 3rd year and we started with a Farm to Cafeteria grant of 10,000, I think. And then The last 2 years and this year, we are getting funding from the Bow Valley Food Bank. So that's our local food bank, and it's based on relationships because they know our school, they know me from around town, and yeah. So for now, that's how we're getting our funding. So we have very little coming from our school board because I wouldn't place us as a in-need school in terms of our school board. So just I'm working on that, working on seeing how we're going to get funding to keep going.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I'll note too, because I know we've got folks joining from all over. And so that kind of like provincial funding availability looks different everywhere. We've had different provinces that have had varying levels of commitment to school food over the last couple of years. And as Brent mentioned in the chat, of course, now with the federal commitment and funding slowly starting to have agreements. We have Manitoba signed last week, Newfoundland and Labrador in earlier September. So hopefully more of the provinces soon will start to sign on that, and we'll see some of the federal funding start to flow. But we also know that that's not enough to make these programs work. And so it's just, there are so many, so many great folks like our speakers on the call today, and I'm sure many of you, and I invite too, if folks have stuff to add who are attending, you all bring great knowledge to this conversation as well. So feel free to chime in the chat or speak up if you like, because we know there's a lot of really creative, innovative ways that folks are making this work. In the meantime, while we continue to kind of advocate for more funding to bring these programs to life in a good way. So I have a question here that's not in the chat, but from earlier. I'm curious if you have any tips for folks who maybe don't actually have a meal program on that note of funding, but maybe they still want to be able to celebrate and bring cultural food into their classroom in another way. Do we have any tips for that folks could kind of get creative?
That's something that we have done as well, because we've gotten funding from a Francophone association to do one meal for the whole school. And they were inviting an Innu artist. So Innu is First Nation from Northern Quebec. And so we did an Innu meal for the whole school. So if you can get funding, even just for one meal, you can set up your systems. I mean, for us, it was about $2,000 to feed 225 people-ish. And so if you can partner with an organization, and that will help kind of just give you an idea of how it could work, and maybe spark interest from other organizations. So that's something that we did do.
Yeah, I love that suggestion, Avni. It's a good and it's a good thing actually for in Farm to School months too. We often encourage it's a great time to host like test tasting events or a celebratory kind of one-off meal, but something that you can invite community to, because it's a great way to engage folks and get them on board and get people curious about, how we could do this more. And so, yeah, just starting that conversation.
Just adding on to that, one of the things we do, and this is probably my third year doing it, is we host a ADST event, so arts and music, and we do what's called like eat, meet and greet evening, which is actually hosted by the students. So the culinary kids will actually cook in front of a live audience. Then they'll transition into the drama room. Those kids will put something on, and we open it up to the community. So Surrey Schools gives us permission to do it, provided things are being checked because it's hosted in a school. And you'd be surprised how many people want to come in after that and be like, hey, how can we help the school, or donate to the school? And like Save On is a huge provider for schools out here. Like they've gone above and beyond. Sometimes they'll send you boxes of just produce that they're like, hey, you guys use this. Or I mean, you never know who's going to come to these kind of events. And actually the people who are backing this up is your admin, because they want to be able to support programs. And when you meet somebody and you share a meal with someone together, you get to know a lot about them. And so when they see kids doing it, the kids are the advocates for the program. You know, and so we've had a lot of people in the past from the community, even the churches that'll come and they'll like, how do we support schools and how do we support that learning? And it's pretty incredible to see how the community comes together to form a different kind of education, and where the kids get to learn and utilize different ingredients and how they get to support our programs.
Yeah, and I'm building off that too, just as a teacher, and I've kind of said this, recipes have got a bad rap in this. I see family recipes as storytelling. So encouraging students to work with, like I said, parents, grandparents, whoever it is, and actually gathering food recipes or menus that are important to them as tradition, and understanding what tradition is and kind of raising that, and then getting students to bring those and share those as something. And to a student that I work with, a recipe is never something that they're following to create something. It's an experience they've had. It's something that reminds them of their grandma. It's, you know, being in the kitchen with, you know, their auntie, whatever it is, right? So finding ways to be kind of bring and tell stories about recipes, and inevitably engaging families and community in that is going to lead to relationship building and weaving together. I would actually say some of this is what was the seeds and the growth of Lunch Lab, right? In conversations with parents and community. The other one is a kind of small grant-ish as a kind of way to get started in BC. Actually through Science World, they had BC Green Games. So the first official kind of unofficial pilot that we did for Lunch Lab that I was able to rope TJ into, and it was way too chaotic because we did it with 3 classes and we had 30 kids prepping food, where we realized 8 to 10 is a much more realistic number. We found a way to create a project and engage 3 classes in these 3 different sustainability initiatives, which was enough to be able to get us beginning to get the grade 6 and 7 students meaningfully involved in food preparation and in sharing a meal together. So I think I think that was $500 that allowed us to get started, right? So it can be small things. It can be relationship with the community, or as TJ said, looking who is in your community. And my hunch is, you know, this is the West End, so maybe it's a little different, but you've got chefs, you've got very competent home cooks that naturally cook for 40 to 50 people because that's what their family does, right? That exists in your community. And how do you bridge that gap? Which is gonna build the capacity for if and when you are able to develop that school food program.
And if I could just jump in real quick as well. Basically, I just started. Just figure out a way to start a pilot to the pilot, which is essentially how Lunch Lab started. We had a pilot to the pilot, and the next year we had another pilot, and then eventually we were recognized to be one. Obviously, everything will come along, but through starting something, you'll learn about everything from the community. You'll learn about you know, their space that you have to work with, and you learn about what things that you need, right? So that's really kind of how it started for us.
That's amazing. Are there any other questions or reflections that folks have? Either that can come from folks on the call, that can come from our presenters. I think I have, maybe while folks are thinking, and if there's nothing, that's okay too. I'm curious if, just gonna check. Thank you so much, Helen. I'm curious if we can just go around to our presenters, and including Shiva, just really quickly, is there one thing that has surprised you about this work that you would like people to know, or something that's maybe you've heard today that's come up?
Who would like to start? Is it me? I'm already talking. Okay. I think for me, it's the biggest thing is for myself, I'm kind of in the same realm, not quite in education, but with a parent with dementia in a nursing home, seeing the pilots that you guys are creating at whatever capacity is incredible and has allowed me to do that over there as well. But also just like with Brent, what you're saying about recipes, like that is my only tie to my mom is through her recipes, even though she never wrote them down because she's very Indian that way, where everything's by feel and taste. It's the hunting for her recipes, trying to figure that out through experience that has been really powerful. And seeing that kids are able to do that from a younger age. Had I only known when I was younger that that was a thing to do to have that connection, I would have done it sooner. So I think it's incredible that you guys are already piping in to do that for kids at a young age.
I'm just gonna feed off that. You know, I grew up in my grandma's kitchen in India. No recipes, you know, and there was something in India, there's a saying that when you cook, and especially the elderly ladies, that when they cook with their hands, that's love that is passed on. It's a very, you know, common thing to hear, like nothing beats grandma's food. And so I grew up just, you know, doing prep or things for her. And whatever I watched her turned into passion for me. And to be able to reiterate that with these kids, these high school kids or these young kids, you know, when you cook from your heart, you don't need any recipe, right? Because you're cooking from your heart. And when I see kids, when they're like, you know, we made paella or we've made a kanafa, which is a Syrian dish, you can sometimes just see the emotions run through these kids, that this was my nani made this, or my dadi made this, or this is how we did it back home. Or, you know, sometimes these stories that are shared through food is absolutely beautiful. And that ties them to who they are. It's part of this cultural identity that they get to live out their culture every single day in the most authentic way possible. There's no recipe. You want to add that, you add it. We have that spice, we'll bring that spice. And they get to, you know, quite often I'll hear, oh, my mom used to make this when I was little, or my grandma made this, you know, where Diwali is coming around, we're making dal makhani. You are not going to find dal makhani in any high school. Or we're doing a thali where we get to bring in different states of India all on one plate. We're going to make the little laddus, which is a Indian sweet, in-house from scratch, from ghee, from start to finish. We're making chai and pakoras, chai made authentically. The kids, like I have kids who are not even in my class. We're like, chef, can I just be a part of this? Because that's my culture. We're bringing the whole school together. We're teaming up with student council to host Diwali. Never done at GP Secondary in this way. And this is what food does. You know, when you bring people to the table, it doesn't matter the age group. If it's done with love, you learn from it. You learn somebody else's culture and you recognize your own, which is super important.
Yeah, and building off that, Nimi, I'll jump just for time. As an educator, how are we not taking advantage of this opportunity to give agency and pride and cultural identity to students, right? So is it, as you hear this, it's almost unimaginable that we wouldn't consider the role of food and culture in schools, right? And what am I surprised by? You know, I had a hunch, but I was surprised how much purpose and care and meaning grade 6 and 7 students will put into being meaningfully involved and contributing themselves and their energy and their time and their culture to this kind of work, right? And I think we don't give students credit for what they will care about and what they're willing to do. And if we set a low bar, they'll also meet it. But if we invite them in and bring their voices and their culture and value that, sky's the limit.
Yeah, and giving that sense of purpose is really the most amazing thing you can do to especially younger kids. We go from kids not being able to hold the knives back, holding it backwards in the first week, to in the third or fourth week, basically setting up a whole salad bar by themselves, right? So like giving them the empowerment to be able to do so, amazing.
And I'll echo everything. And particularly, I was personally surprised by the parent volunteers who have come out and created this amazing community around the school food program. So it inspires me to keep going because I'm doing it as a volunteer. But now, like, having the energy of them continuing to do it helps a lot as well. And from this webinar, I'm learning, and hopefully we'll be able to have the time and space to do it, to engage the kids more. So far it's kind of been a top down because I'm a parent, so coming from that perspective, but listening to you all, it's more inspiring to have the kids involved in all the different aspects of it. So maybe that'll be our next webinar.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You brought us right in on time there, Avni. And I just want to take a minute to thank everybody for coming today, for the participants, and for the folks in the future that are watching or recording, and for the work that you do, and just a really special thanks to Chef Conwy, Chef Nimi, Avni, Brent, and of course Shiva for being here to guide us through the conversation today. And shout out to Jenna, our amazing coordinator in the background, who's been helping with slides and timing and everything else as well.